Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 2022 virtual tasting for Eureka Whiskey Club. Hope everyone had an amazing holiday season and a happy new year. We are very excited to kick off 2022 with some amazing partners for the Whiskey Club heading into this year, and we'll do intros here in a second. But I hope everyone was able to pick up their box and is ready to make some delicious cocktail tonight. I wanted to go ahead and introduce our lovely guest this evening, and then we'll talk about the prizes for tonight, which I know everyone is always very excited about. So, guests, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
So thank you so much for having us. My name is Ashby Marshall. I'm co-owner and head distiller here at Spiritworks Distillery. And I brought with me my talented husband and co-owner as well, Timo Marshall.
I'm Timo. Hi. Lovely to be here, Trevor. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, I didn't realize this was the first release in the new year. But
Yeah. First one of 2022. I think this is month. I can never remember. It's like month 19 or month 20. There we go. My behind the scenes people are here to help me. Month 20 of Eureka Whiskey Club. So we're almost coming up on 2 years of running this program, which is very exciting. But we are very excited to learn all about Spiritworks Distillery and Ashby and Timo and your history. Just a quick kind of business get out of the way really quick. As always, we have a couple great prizes to give away this evening that Ashby and Timo have been very generous to give away. So we have not one, not two, not three, or I'm sorry, not one, not two, three signed whiskey bottles by Ashby and Timo that we will be giving away to the best question of the night. So as always, please type your questions into the chat. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube. If the name of your account is not the name of your account associated with your Whiskey Club membership, just remember to type the name of the Whiskey Club membership. But if your name is the same, then just ignore everything I said. And then also we have another prize giveaway, which is going to be a swag backpack kind of filled with a bunch of, branded items, memorabilia from Spiritworks Distillery, which is always cool to represent. I know I have a really cool long sleeve that I like from you guys that I rock all the time, and just some super cool stuff. So getting excited to taste some whiskey. We're going to make a cocktail tonight. And again, just type your questions in the comment section, and we're going to go ahead and try to get to everyone as possible. But now that we've gotten the business out of the way, we can start with the exciting stuff, which is learning about Spiritworks Distillery and all the fun things associated with it. So I guess start off the bat, I'm sure some of our members are familiar with Spiritworks, but I'd imagine that a lot of them aren't. And so we'd love to kind of just hear the history of the distillery, both of your backgrounds, how you got into the industry, and why you've chosen to make amazing whiskey in California.
Thank you. Well, just very quickly, a very overarching picture of us. We are a small craft distillery in Sebastopol, so an hour north of San Francisco. And we just have the one location. We're actually sitting in the tasting room right now with this window behind us. You can see the still behind us there. So like as a big picture, we've been around for about 10 years, and this is actually our 10th year in business.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. It's pretty exciting that we're still here.
Fingers the balloons.
Yeah, it'll happen at some point. So Ashby and I actually met working on ships a long time ago as deckhands on ships, working all around the world. And that's how we met. And we ended up.
What type of ships? Like what were they, cargo ships?
No, like icebreakers. And it was environmental research work, really all around the world. We were very lucky to travel a lot with our jobs, and that's how we met, working on the decks of those ships. I have a background in sailing. Actually, came into it from another direction, but we ended up. I'm not from these parts. You might be able to tell by my accent and good looks.
Never would have guessed.
Yeah, but and so we decided to settle in San Francisco. Ashby promised me that I would love the city, and she was right. And the idea was to keep sailing once we got here, and just but settle in San Francisco. And once we got here, we loved this area that we're in so much, Sonoma County, West County. We knew that eventually we were going to move out of the city and move up here. And so we started thinking of different avenues, entrepreneurial avenues that we could take to actually settle down here and start our own business up here. We're both pretty gin obsessed in some ways, and so we thought that we would move up here and buy some land and make the land work for us. And we thought we would grow botanicals actually for gin, and hook up with a local distillery and see if we could produce a ultra micro gin product out here. My family has been making sloe gin, which is a traditional British liqueur for long generations, and I've been making sloe gin since I was about 14, and so that was a big part of our plan as well, moving out here. And
all of that being said, being near a craft, anywhere near a still that is going to be able to produce spirits, meant to me that we were 100% making also beautiful whiskeys. And so we brought that like sort of passion together. Like,
we have Ashby to thank then. That's who we're.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize.
Against gin. Gin's amazing.
I was like, oh, I was like, let's build the gin house. This is going to be awesome. And Ashby was like, yeah, sure. They were absolutely. It's sacrilege to own a still and not make whiskey. I hadn't realized.
And the sloe gin is an incredibly special thing that we do make. We're the only producers in the U.S. that we reuse actual real fruit, and so it is something that I'm very proud of. I'm very happy that we. Also
that's pretty unique to us.
So Timo was saying we ended up sort of honing in the Sonoma County area and West County. People love to live here. They love to eat well here. They love to know where things are grown, where everything's produced. And so it was a really great environment for us to sort of start looking into. Of course, people are used to drinking in the area because of, I should say tasting in the area because of the wine countries. You
can say drinking. Fine.
We were like, 10 years ago, there was only a few of us. And so it was a pretty good idea to be like, people are accustomed to tasting and are interested in trying local things. So that's where we started.
Timo, you said your family makes sloe gin back in England. Is that correct?
Yeah. They don't make it commercially. I was just looking around to see.
Oh, so it's just like so your family just made it for fun. It wasn't like a product that was for sale or anything.
Yeah, no, it's actually quite, it's kind of looked down upon a bit in England to make it commercially because they claim that there's
We're not broadcasting it overseas, so don't worry.
Yeah, and it's so much hard work to work the fruit to get the juice out, right? So sloe berries are like a wild plum; they're tiny, and so you have to use quite a lot of the berries to actually produce a bottle of sloe gin. And it's a sweet liqueur, right? So it's like when I first moved out here, I found some sloe gin in bars. It's a very different product than what I remembered sloe gin to be from the UK. It has its place out here in the history of dive bars and various places, but it's not. It's a very different product that we make, I'm glad to say. And so that was the focus, and it gave us a way in, so to speak. It was a conversation starter for us to make sloe gin.
And then Ashby, like, what was your introduction to kind of the spirits world, or where did that passion come from to start to open a distillery? And obviously sounds like you put Timo in his place and said, we're making some whiskey here as well. So where did that love of whiskey come from?
I mean, I'm a gardener and I'm a cook. And so I've always wanted to produce things from things that grow. And so I've always done, home beer and done that side of things. I brew kombucha. And so there's a lot of that beauty in it. And the distillation side of it is sort of to magnify what you've done in fermentation into something even more stunning. And so that dream of mine sort of always existed. And I particularly just happen to have interest in whiskeys, and my palate blended there as well. So sort of it was really, as we talked about those sort of separate dreams together, it was like, The slow gin is a really great thing because that's going to be something unique. And yet it's also going to give us, as a grain to glass distillery, a really great grain that we can start working with to produce other things.
So yeah, that kind of you kind of mentioned it, already, your passion for taking things that grow and kind of turning it into art, or, I guess, can you build on that? Like, did you always know that you wanted to be grain to glass and grow everything on site? And I guess, like, why did you feel that was the best approach? And maybe what challenges does that, bring up? I'd imagine a lot.
Sure. At the beginning,
making alcohol, or being a distillery that does, sources all your own grains.
At the beginning, we were initially thinking of joining with another distillery to sort of take the family recipe and expand the slow gin. And what we really discovered back in the day was there were very, very few distilleries actually producing from grain to glass. And that actual, just to start with the source of the base of what you're going to make something into seemed fundamentally essential to us. We're both from environmental backgrounds, and it was just how it was going to be done. We were like, it's absolutely grain to glass because that's how it's made.
When we went back to school and hung out at various distilleries to learn how to distill. And I guess we were fortunate in the fact that everywhere we went to learn about the distillation process, everything was started with the grain and fermentation. And it's a passion that we had, as Ashley said, at home brewing and various things like that. And so the fermentation side to us was really important, and we couldn't imagine that we wouldn't do it that way. In fact, we were surprised when other other craft distilleries didn't. However, this was the first time we had set out to build our own business. So we hadn't really taken into account the business side of milling, mashing, fermenting, brewing your own alcohol to then distill it. It's way easier.
Plant all your own crops too. Were any of the crops there when you inherited the land, or were these all brand new?
So we don't have any land, and that was the plan to begin with, was to grow our own. But we source the grain here locally. We don't grow it ourselves. So that was another thing, right? We were looking to build a distillery and grow things on a land, but we realized very quickly that we're not farmers. I take my hat off to anyone that works the land. That is hard work, intuitive. Yep.
There you go.
And it is like, I have so much respect for people that understand the land and how it works. And that's not me. And so I'm a sailor. Put me on the ocean, and I can handle that and tell you all about it for days. But the land, I get freaked out standing on small mounds of soil. So that wasn't going to work. But we, like our wheat, for example, the first spirit that I distilled legally in this country was wheat whiskey, and so I really focused a lot on that grain. And at the time, Ashley and I had never worked with wheat in that way before, and we fell in love with it. And then when we started looking for the raw materials here to make our products from, we discovered this awesome organic red winter wheat out of the Sacramento Valley, Yolo County, places like that. And it just lent itself. It just seemed like everything was set up for us to go down that road. It was great. And then also,
I mean, it was just you found this specific type of wheat and fell in love with it, or was there a specific reason why you chose wheat versus, the most common, I think that most people in the U.S. are trying to make? I know this was 10 years ago, so maybe it's different, but bourbon is obviously king. Like, I guess, what was the why behind starting with wheat?
That comes from some of that regionality on really looking back at what grows here traditionally. And so wheat grows very comfortably here in the West Coast. And so it was sort of our interpretation that whiskeys were clearly, obviously, a lot from wheat in this area as well. And you can just kind of make those connections where you're clearly, this is something that thrives in this environment and makes the most sense for us to be using. We, of course, also do now make a bourbon and a rye whiskey. We have found both California grown sources of, and organic. But those took a little bit longer to develop the relationships and get those going.
Also, a lot of people work with corn to make a base for their white spirits, for example, for their gin and things like that. But we felt that the mouthfeel of wheat itself, in comparison, particularly for a high proof alcohol like that, to make a base out of, lent itself really well to the wheat that we found. And once we discovered it, we stopped looking kind of.
We in our tasting room here, we have 100% vodka that's made from 100% organic red winter wheat. And then what you guys have had here is 100% organic red winter wheat whiskey. And I think that comparison is really interesting because you're starting with the same grain, and there are very few factors that go into it becoming something different. One is the yeast that we use. One is the distillation technique. And then, of course, one is going into a barrel and one isn't. But we had our vodka from our red winter wheat because that was our base for our gin to become slow gin. And we could really see the potential for flavor profiles and congeners that we could work out in fermentations that would end up doing incredible things in barrels from that experience from making a vodka, which is meant to be neutral, but it was showing so much potential. Yeah. And our vodka has a lot of flavor.
We never planned to sell the vodka at the beginning. We were just going to use it to make our gin and things. But straight away, people wanted to get their hands on it because of the mouthfeel of the wheat. So we love the fact that the grain comes through so strongly on that side of things. And then, obviously, as Ashley was saying, wheat whiskey, which we consider to be a traditional whiskey out here on the West Coast, is so special when it's grain forward in that way. Wheat whiskey is it's pretty unusual as whiskeys go. So we just fell in love with it.
Yeah, I absolutely love the fact that you're trying to, produce something that represents the California region and just the West Coast. Obviously, the reason they use corn in Kentucky, to make the first bourbons were because corn was an affluent grain and crop in the state. And same reason they use oak for aging process, because oak was a prevalent type of tree that grew in Kentucky. So it's, humans, if you read back in the history of certain alcohols, that kind of is where alcohol started, was, people sourcing local ingredients and taking things that Mother Nature gave them and turning it into this fun juice that makes you feel good, right?
So you get to the one level, you see it ferment, you understand naturally you have that potential. So what if I just boiled you and and extracted the vapor from there? What would that be like?
Yeah, value added, right? It was way easier to transport if you could, your field of wheat, if you could make it smaller and smaller all the time, and eventually end up with spirits that you could sell, value product. Yeah.
And you started out with vodka. I think the old bar adage is vodka pays the bills. So
yeah. Yeah, I think we're pretty lucky. We have quite a wide range of products here. We're a craft distillery, and so we're always experimenting and doing interesting things. It's part of why we got into this business. We want to be creative, and we want to explore and see what else is out there. So we actually make quite a wide range of products in the end.
And we have something similar to you guys. We have our own spirits club, similar to a wine club. And, one of those tiers is something that we release that's unique most every quarter. And so there's something that's coming out of this distillery, whether it's a very unique whiskey that's been aging back there a long time, or a gin that we really wanted to go crazy with some botanicals. It kind of gives us that creative outlet. So we're not always just producing the exact same recipe every time.
And then you throw, I think, the word craft distillery, with beer, there's, a governing entity for that in the Brewers Association. There's not so much in the craft spirits world. I guess just to give everyone an idea of, how truly small you guys are, what is your, how many cases of product are you producing per year?
We get asked that question all the time, and it's really hard to answer because in terms of production, we make our own products, and we also make products for other people here. So we do quite a lot of white label, and we're also putting down barrels of whiskey every year. So our production rate is kind of hard to answer. We could talk about it a little bit more in terms of market share,
Yeah.
and not market share, but in terms of
Distribution.
And so we could say that, like, for example, I would say a good 85 to 90% of our business is in Northern California alone. And then the rest of the business is opportunistic in maybe 4 or 5 other states. And in Southern California as well. Although really everything is here locally around us. And now over the past year and a half online as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the things I take pride in our beverage program is that we, in addition to carrying some great products, made outside of the states we're in, we have a ton of whiskeys made in Kentucky and Tennessee and other states. But in each of our markets, we really like to highlight the local producers. And I think that one of the common misperceptions is that bourbon has to come from Kentucky, or most people, when they think of whiskey, they think, oh, it has to come from Kentucky. And it's really exciting for me to be able to highlight people that are doing things locally in each of our states and really supporting, small producers such as yourself. So I just want to say thank you and love what you guys are doing. And it's fun for me to be able to show people that love whiskey that are in our club, things that are happening, not, I want to say in their backyard, but, in the state that they're in, rather than, just, thinking everything great comes from Kentucky.
And there's so much growth in craft distilling these days that, when we started, there was only maybe 3 in Sonoma County, and now you can probably hit a tasting room of maybe 11 or so. And so that in itself gives opportunity and creativity for the distillers and also for the consumer to be able to really not just be given one type and to be shown all sorts of different creative ways that people produce their spirits.
Yeah. So how does the climate in California, obviously climate's a big factor in really producing a lot of different types of alcoholic beverages, whether it be wine or, you look at open fermentation beer in Europe and in Belgium. Like, what is the climate of California due to the whiskey and the maturation process? And, what are the advantages? What are the challenges compared to aging in, Kentucky?
I can't compare to aging in Kentucky, or we can't. I've never really spent enough time. You have to spend a whole cycle to understand what the weather's going to do for you out there. So I can't compare, but I can definitely talk a little bit about California, but even more specifically, this town that we're in, Sebastopol. So California, obviously, it gets pretty warm here in the summer, and it's pretty mild in the winter. But there is quite a difference between the two, actually. Although people say we only really have one season out here. Where we are right now in the town of Sebastopol, if you head directly west from us, you hit the ocean pretty quickly in about 20 minutes, which is awesome if you're a surfer and like hanging out on the beach. Which is really nice. And then if you go,
water must be pretty cold up there, though. Yeah. Sorry.
It is.
It's also British. Cold water doesn't make him scared.
It's chilly. I'm scared of the sharks up here. That's for sure. That's new for me. I don't really understand that. That's an American thing, I'm sure. But
they're real.
They are real. So we've got ocean there and kind of hills between us and the ocean. So we have the marine fog that comes in from the ocean. And then if you go directly east from us, I'm actually pointing in those directions. That's why I'm doing this with my arms. If you go east from us, you hit the Santa Rosa Plain, and it kind of opens up into Sonoma Valley itself, and then Napa Valley, the other side of it. Really hot, and we're right on the edge. And so we get that really cold mornings, and then by the end of the day, it gets really hot. So on a daily basis, we have great temperature change here. And then seasonally, or what we call seasonally, from winter to summer, there's a pretty big difference as well. And so we
often say, like, in the production space, which isn't climate controlled intentionally, it's never comfortable for a human because it's either too cold or too hot, which is great for whiskey. People want to be like just in this like neutral zone. We're like, no, it's doing stuff out there.
Yeah, and so
and do you feel that change in temperature has any effect on like accelerated aging at all?
Well, we believe there's definitely quite a good movement in and out of the wood there because of that change of temperature, right? And so we believe that for us, the level of extraction that we have been working with over these years and the level of interaction between the wood themselves and between the wood itself and the whiskey is exactly where we want it to be. And we've had to change our maybe change the wood. Change by wood, I mean change the toast and char maybe slightly over the years to like really start dialing it in to make use of the weather out here, because we are a small facility and we're not about to start climate controlling our rick house. And so
we're also traditionalists in the sense that we never use small barrels. So everything in our barrel room is 53-gallon full-size barrels. And that is that's worth it to us to take the time and do it in how it's meant to be done. And be like, okay, we're going to give it the right climate and give it the time and the right barrel.
So what level of char did you guys kind of decide was the sweet spot for your maturation process?
Well, we started with like the deepest char 5 or something. We dialed that back to char 4 pretty quickly, like within the first year, I want to say, and stuck with that for a while. And then more recently, and by that I mean in the past 3 or 4 years, that's recent in whiskey years, right? More recently, we've also been having the barrels pre-toasted and then charred, right? So like baked for a while and then put to fire, and that has just brought in, and literally toasting a barrel brings in all those toasted flavors, right? And so toasted coconut and like those really interesting esters in there that you just miss out on in a char. And so I think the future of our whiskey is going to be interesting as well. I mean, no better, no worse, but just a slightly different take on what we're making right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So do you guys have the whiskey with you?
Yes.
Yes.
No, we kept a bottle, I'm afraid to say.
I kept a bottle.
I hope you kept a couple, but if you only kept one, then savor it. But
we should mention this bottle is not only special because it's the batch one it's the first cast strength wheat that left our distillery, but you also get to feature our pandemic special glass because every supply chain was disrupted, and we were lucky enough to get a hold of actually this bottle, which we love.
Our traditional bottle is a flask type bottle.
So what you're saying is it's even more rare and unique.
Yeah, we actually.
That's great.
Yeah, we're a small craft distillery. So if we can't get the bottles, if the bottles won't come to us in a hurry, we will adapt, and we can pretty quickly. And so, we moved on to round bottles for a while, and eventually, hopefully, we'll move back to ours when they come back. Here, let me.
Yeah, so I'd love to. I'm gonna minimize my screen here a little bit so I can. So as always, we're gonna taste the whiskey. It would be great to hear. I know all the members like to hear what the other members think of the whiskey, and so if you have notes that you want to put into the comment section here, it always helps out. Again, I always say one person may taste something, and then you see it with your eyes, and you're like, oh my God, yes, that is what I could not put my finger on. I have some notes here as always. Our Whiskey Club cards. Timo and Ashby, I'd love to, hear a little bit about the barrels here. We have them listed and the age statements on them. It's a mix of, 5 years all the way up to 6 years and 9 months. So the whiskey does have some age on it. I have my tasting notes here as well as our flavor scales, which we put together. So
we got a copy.
We did.
Oh, wonderful.
So this is really special, that we knew that this was a project that we were going to put together, and we knew that the volume was more than would be a single barrel release, of course. So we figured we could really work with the wheat whiskeys that we had and bring together that blend that we thought would be right for this audience. And so that's why we incorporated some of those older barrels that we have Because all of our whiskeys that go out in market are a minimum of 4 years. And so this is something that's a little bit age that you definitely can't get out there at all right now, and thought that this would be a special place for you guys to be able to enjoy it with particularly excellent whiskey fans.
Yeah. And also putting it out at cask, right? So we this is the first cask wheat whiskey that we put out in market. We've had it before just out of the tasting room here in Sebastopol, but it hasn't had this reach before. So this really is pretty unique. It just doesn't exist anywhere else out in market in this way. You were talking about the barrels themselves. I mean, we went through it before, but these are Char 4 American White Oak, Quercus Alba. They're all of these barrels are out of Lebanon, Missouri, just across the border from Lebanon, Kentucky. I made the mistake of going to the wrong Lebanon once when looking for barrels. But there is a Lebanon, Missouri, and this is Missouri oak in that way.
And if you ever get the chance to go visit a cooperage, absolutely do it.
It's independent stave, right?
Incredible process to see. Real skill besides just toasting and charring wood.
Putting staves together, watching those guys work is just incredible. So that's the type of barrels that we have here. And then blending them was a ton of fun as well. Just deciding on the bench top what we wanted to put together, which barrels we were selecting out to put together with you guys. And I'm glad that this group was the ones that ended up, because this is phenomenal. We were talking about it today, and we knew you'd be asking us about tasting notes. Really, we want to hear what everyone else has to say. So we did a bunch of tasting here with the crew again. So it was a good wheat whiskey tasting day. And yes, these were new oak barrels.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can see I was
you're making something.
Yeah.
cooking something up.
Yeah, we saw this cocktail recipe that came with it. But yes, the whiskey itself, of course, you're going to go going for the nose first, and then palate, and then finish. And we were, once this was blended together, it's such a special thing to be able to be at a distillery and actually be over a tank of something like this, as opposed to a glass of it. There's like another level of open aeration that you get reaching these. And I think some of the notes mention that tobacco side of things, but I really get that like sweet pipe tobacco on the nose for myself. Almost, if I close my eyes, I can almost imagine like toasted marshmallows, like at a campfire, not the burnt ones, but the ones that are just
the perfect ones.
Yeah, the ones you actually.
Perfect ones.
I mean, everyone's perfect is different, but what do you get on the nose?
I mean, interestingly for me, I get raisins. We were talking earlier as well. I get a little raisin type on the nose as well. And I agree with someone who mentioned that I don't really get the cherry either as much, I think, as some folk are pointing it out. But for me, definitely raisins. I get an interesting pear skin type feel as well, or on the nose. I mean, along with all the things you're mentioning, I can find them in there if I look. But those are the interesting ones for me. That's
the joy of doing tastings with other people. It's almost not as much fun to just kind of do this on your own. Like it's a conversation, and you want to hear what someone else is getting and be like, oh, you're finally. I think you said that you're finally putting the word to what I'm like trying to articulate.
Yeah.
You'll notice in my tasting notes, I always, and our members probably have caught on to this already. I'm very like food oriented and like baking or desserts or like, so I don't know. I just like taste this, and I thought like waffles with maple syrup with like walnuts sprinkled over them.
We have someone here who is he's training in distilling right now, and at one point he stood there and he was like, okay, so this type, and I'm not going to get into it, but he was like, this type is baking spices and that is cooking spices. And someone else looked at them and they were like, I mean, not necessarily. And I was like, hang on a second. If that helps him identify and like can give him his own perspective on what he's doing, then that's absolutely, that can be totally correct.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like what helps you in your own language get there.
I'm all about baking and pies and things like that. So I'm always going to find baked apple pie and things. I'm always going to look for that as well. Baking spices as well. The other thing that I find interesting about this wheat is it's got some floral in there, which I find quite interesting. So like, almost like some chamomile in there, like
mild jasmine or something.
Some bergamot. I think people that are picking out orange and candied orange, that's for me, it's like a bergamot type Earl Grey type reminder to me. I mean, I'm a tea drinker as well, so
and I think one of the tasting notes you guys have is that black tea note at the end.
That on the tail end, I get it. It kind of finishes like with a dry cacao and then black tea. And fun fact about me, I'm allergic to coffee, so I'm a tea drinker as well. So
me too. I'm not allergic to it, but my heart thinks that I've had a different species than anything else. So.
Yeah, it doesn't agree. Yeah.
I'm not going to die or anything if I drink it. It just doesn't agree with me is the best way to put it.
So also it's at cask strength, and we mustn't forget that, right? So if you start diluting it a little bit, either with rocks or water, you're going some of the other deeper, more buttery flavors are going to start coming to the surface as well, right? 61.8%. This was the cask strength, and we didn't proof it at all. This was just the final blend. This was the proof it was at. So, which is why it's at cask, right? No, it's not manipulated.
No, it's beautiful.
Literally, the charcoal maybe was the only thing that was left out of there.
Removed, yeah. And it works pretty well.
That I think I saw some note somewhere, and someone said, this doesn't drink like the ABV that it is, and that's something I'm really proud of. That means we're distilling in a really excellent way that you can drink a spirit.
Yeah, and you're blending great too, right? Because these were a blend of all these different lovely barrels that I'm super jazzed about it. So I'm, I know our members are as well. So
thanks. Yeah. Go ahead.
So we do have the cocktail recipe, which I'm sure you saw people make, and thank you for the people in the comment section that said they made it. But just really quick, it's on your sheets, but it's 2 ounces of the barrel pick from Spirit Works. You can use sweet vermouth. Sorry, I said vermouth. Weird there. Sweet vermouth. I'm not using sweet vermouth. I suggest using Amaro Montenegro. A little bit more of a herbal characteristic, and then just 1 dash of Angostura, 1 dash of black walnut bitters, and then 1 dash of cherry bitters. I'm using house-made cherry bitters that I made, but I hope everyone can make the cocktail and enjoy the whiskey. And I think just really happy with the pick this month. We do have some questions to get to. I did have one last question for Ashby, actually. I just, I think over the past 20 years, women in the distilling industry have made, rightfully so, just so many leaps and bounds in the industry. And I guess I was just wanting to get your thoughts on that and on the future of women in distilling and kind of your experience with it, and where you think it'll be moving forward.
I think just like any industry these days, there's just a lack of a gender reason for anyone to be in one role or another. And so that's just sort of naturally happening in all sorts of areas. But of course, traditionally, roles that are more manufacturing tend to have men in that sort of role. But I think it's been a real pleasure for me to be in this industry. One, because the women who are in it are so collegial and helpful, and it's a really great environment for the community that we do have. But as a woman in this sort of industry, you know, of course, every once in a while you come across someone who, you know, might look at me and say, oh, is your boss around? And so, of course, I could have, you know, there's stories every once in a while. But in the grand scheme of things, I think the most important thing is to know what you're doing and do it well. And then that's where your respect come from, you know, just part of doing what we do here and making sure that we make great spirits. And we've had a legacy of female distillers. There's a couple women that I've also trained here, and that's something we're really proud of. But it's also something that we would never, you know, restrict in any sort of way. Because there's a guy right now, and he's an incredible distiller.
Timo is lucky you were there to push him towards making whiskey, because that was the right call.
Yeah.
So I've had the gin though, and it is really, really good. But obviously I'm partial to whiskey. So
totally.
Thank you for the honest answer. I appreciate it. So I do want to get to, we have about 20, 30 minutes left here. So I do want to get to questions in the chat. So, if you haven't asked a question already, please feel free to do so. We'll try to get to everyone's that we can. So just starting off the top here, Austin Shaver, sorry. What do you do with the byproducts of your distillation process?
So yeah, that is one of our environmental factors that we both we sort of glazed over that, but we come from environmental backgrounds, and so that's something that we're always factoring in: how to preserve, how to save water, how to not put things down the drain, and we do similarly what breweries do. So farmers are taking that away for different fertilizer, and some for feed for pigs as well. And actually, recently we've had more interest from the cannabis industry for fertilizer as well, which is a pretty good little ecosystem up here to tie into.
Yeah, it obviously costs money as well for a small manufacturer to pay for the waste to be processed appropriately. And so having a symbiotic relationship with local farmers, we used to give our stillage out to a pig farmer, and we'd get back some bacon. Now fertilizer for the cannabis industry, and that's always nice. And so it's very it works really well here locally.
And because our grains are organic, we also help complete a cycle for a lot of places
that's great.
Are only sourcing it somewhere else.
No.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember, a few years ago there was Jerry Brown, overturned that law that kind of taxed the spent grain that was being given, and I was pretty irate when I heard that happening, and I was glad to hear that overturned. So I'm sure that affected you in some way or another at the time. But
yeah, that was right at the beginning, from when we were first starting to distill, and in Jerry's day, Jerry Brown's day.
Well, I'm glad that the cycle is continuing, and the organic grain is being given to a good home, and Timo's getting some bacon out of it. So that's always a good thing. Devin Shop asks, do you guys use the same yeast for all distillates?
No, we don't. So we use a yeast, but it produces our 190 proof spirit, which is the base for our vodka, gin, and slow gin, and barrel gin. And then we use a separate yeast that's for our whiskeys. And so all of our whiskey profiles do use the same yeast once we're using that. And that has to do with what sort of fermentations we want to run and the flavors that we're trying to get out of them. So a 190 yeast, as we refer to it, is something that's a lot more robust and sort of like gets through all of that sugar and makes us the alcohol, because we need really high proof spirit. And then the whiskey yeast will take a little bit more time and be a little more delicate about it.
And have you cultivated your yeast strains over time, or you're buying a specific type of yeast for the?
We purchase yeast for this program. We don't have any here that we are actually harvesting and producing ourselves.
Yeah, we tried propagating for a while at the beginning, and it's just a full-time job, just propagating yeast. And so
we literally need
having a small. We did think about having a small safe somewhere and saying that's where we kept our yeast, like other distilleries do, but no.
Like just an empty safe.
Yeah, put a bag of yeast in there. That's where our yeast comes from. No, we don't. We just buy it.
Ruben, I'm sorry. I always apologize because I'm the whitest person ever and always mispronounce names. Ruben Aceves, what gin What gin producing techniques have you utilized in whiskey distillation?
Interesting question.
I didn't understand.
What have we learned from gin production that we use in our whiskey production and distillation, right? And actually, they're very different. It's such totally different distillations. And one, you're trying to extract flavor during the distillation, which is gin, and the other, whiskey, you are trying to contain and keep the flavor, right, as through that process. However, both of them are alembic distillations, so they're both simple pot distillations. So they're similar in that way, but I wouldn't say one has taught the other, really.
Yeah. Other than time at the still teaches you a lot of things that, like running any piece of equipment, you get better at it.
It teaches me what not to do. All the mistakes I make.
Jeremy Dirks asks, what's the story behind the name Spiritworks?
Oh, that's an easy one. So Timo and I were brainstorming at a bar, and we always, once we got to the point that we knew we were 100%.
Where all the best ideas come to fruition.
Exactly. I mean, I can name it specifically. We were in Potrero Hill.
In San Francisco, Saloon.
Bloom Saloon.
Bloom Saloon, it was called, or it still is called, I think.
Secret view in the city. Anyway, we were just literally brainstorming names and we were trying to think of a way of articulating that we actually made it. And we were like, what about Spiritworks?
Like Ironworks, Steelworks, something like that. And so we wanted to give the impression that and rightfully, that we manufacture it ourselves from scratch. We make it here. That's the idea behind Spiritworks.
Yeah, it's not a brand with spirits. It's something that there's producers of it.
Yeah, and that's also why there's a cog in there as well. That was just part of the factory or manufacturing symbol to us. We wanted something in there that reflected a little bit of the fact that this is machinery that we're running and that we're manufacturing it here.
And interestingly, once we settled on that name, then we of course, we're looking in to make sure no one else had it. And what kept popping up was people who designed like miniature train sets and they would have like an Ironworks and a Steelworks, and then thered be a Spiritworks. And it was like the name for distilleries back in the day.
Yeah, way back, apparently.
And then we were like, are you sure no one else has this name? And no one did back in the day, so we grabbed it.
Yeah.
So it was helping us articulate that we really were producers here, very hands-on.
Awesome. So just moving on here, Sam Castellano wants to know, did you have any idea on the expressions that you wanted to produce when you started, or did the climate dictate that after the fact? So, I mean, did you have something you like really wanted to do and then just weren't able to do, or, how did that affect it?
I think we knew that we were going to make a wheat whiskey just because we're out here and we just love wheat whiskey.
Yeah.
We did bet heavily on rye as well. And so I'm glad to say that our rye we're very flattered with the awards and the compliments that we get for our straight rye whiskey as well. And so we always knew we were going to do those too. We've wanted to make some interesting whiskeys along the line and really wanted to make them. And some of them just haven't. They don't lend themselves to where we're at out here necessarily in that sense. One of them, and it's also the nature of the grain itself, but like we made an oat whiskey, which I'm not sure we'll ever make an oat whiskey again. It's delicious. Don't get me wrong, it's delicious, but man, that was hard work. The fermentation part of that was hard work, really long and sticky. And
yeah, I was gonna say, you have a sticky mash bill there for sure.
Super sticky.
Yeah.
It was really that was a messy mash right there.
There are a couple barrels of those back there, and we just tasted it recently, and man, they were good.
Yeah,
there's always reason to do that. We've done Triticale, like I said, there is an outlet for us to do those creative releases, and more, spirits clubs are finding us and getting real interest in us. And so it's nice to have a lot of variety back there that we've also tapped into.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just scanning through these questions here.
You're good. I mean, I can keep talking about different varietals that we have in the back. Like we make a spelt whiskey occasionally, and just another type of wheat. Any new type of grain that we find interesting that we can do a one-off run kind of thing, just put a couple of barrels back there. We love exploring in that way. As I said, we're a craft distillery, so we want to make craft.
And we've been
follow
honing
craft.
in on our, even, of course, Sacramento is regional, but we've actually just recently really developed a relationship with a local farmer who's working on doing not only wheat, but rye and corn that are also organic and grown here in Sebastopol, which is, many, many years away from being whiskey, but it is many close minutes and,
We get
months away
super
from me
excited.
milling it into whiskey. So it's,
Cool. I think this is an interesting question. It kind of just like how the community has embraced you. You've been around for 10 years and, you said when you first started, there were kind of only 3 places and now there's more like 11, but Ben Powers is asking the question, can you speak to what it's like to be different in Sonoma County, considering that the majority of the region is wine?
Oh, I think it's great to be different. There's, we're in the location of our distillery is in a destination called the Barlow. And so in the Barlow itself are, restaurants and coffee shops and things like that. But there's also a couple wineries and a couple breweries and, coffee roaster and things. And I 100% love the people who break off from their group because they want something different and end up here. Those are our people.
Yeah.
I'm
Definitely.
you deal with the wine bus tours and stuff though, right?
We closed our tasting room early. It's funny you should say that, but we literally closed our tasting room slightly early because this isn't what this is about, right? People come here literally to taste this as opposed to do shots, right? And so it's
and I think that, like I
interesting in that
mentioned,
way.
the Sonoma County side of things, that there is at least people are accustomed to tasting things. And so there is that benefit, I would say, within wine country that people.
Yeah, they complement each other pretty well, and people understand the whole concept pretty well, and so it's a good environment for us to be in. The city itself of Sebastopol was so welcoming to us. I can't stress enough how helpful that was to us at the beginning as new business owners setting up a new business in a town like this, particularly a distillery. It's a pretty intense process to go through. But the city of Sebastopol and the people here were just in those first few years, like 2010, 11, 12, they were so welcoming to us during that process. It was lovely, really lovely.
This is probably a question we should have answered from the get-go here because we're talking a ton about wheat whiskey, but like what Bourbon Collect, Rob wants to know what constitutes wheat whiskey versus wheated bourbon or something else, like 51% wheat, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Any whiskey that has a title in front of it will be at least 51% of whatever that title is. So rye whiskey will be at least 51%. Our wheat whiskey happens to be 100%. Something we didn't talk about.
What we're drinking here is 100% wheat.
And then bourbon is the one that just doesn't say corn in front of it, but that one's also 51% corn. Something we didn't mention about the wheat that we were using and the whiskey in general is that none of it was malted wheat and there's no malted grains in there. And that was also intentional to really feature the flavor of the grain, because I found malt to be a very specific flavor, which I love in certain places. And that's something that I think is surprising to people when they first try our whiskeys, or at least the wheat whiskey, that there isn't that malt element, but then they really lean into all the other beautiful flavors that you can see past that.
Yeah. So it's 100% raw wheat berries. It's just literally wheat berries.
A wheated bourbon still is a bourbon. So that means it still is 51% corn, but then there's predominantly the rest of the grain is a wheat. And so then it gets tricky, but you're always sticking on that final defining.
51% is the magic number.
That's correct. Yeah.
More than half.
I have a couple more questions here, then we're going to pick a couple favorites.
Cool.
Danielle Williams wants to know, what did your family and friends say when you wanted to open a distillery?
They were like, awesome. I have a little story about that. My great-great-grandfather in the UK, he carved a piece of furniture, which is this beautiful oak chest that sits in the corner of my grandparents' living room, and they used it as a bar. And when my grandparents passed back in the day, it was literally in their will that their two sons, so my father and my uncle, had to flip a coin 3 times to see who got the carved bar from my great great grandfather.
That's amazing.
And so my dad won the coin toss. So my dad got the bar, and I gave it about a week. I thought that was enough time. And then one day I got my dad by myself, and I was like, so the bar. I have 3 siblings, so I was like, so the bar in the corner. Have you thought which one is going to get the bar, down the road? And he said, man, it took you so long. The other 3 have already asked me. Right? So he said, he sat us all down. He was like, all right, about the bar, whoever keeps the bar most stocked during my retirement will get the bar in the will. And so he often jokes that Ashby and I built a distillery to compete with my siblings.
Well, I'd imagine you're winning at this point.
Winning, yeah.
Relatively well, yeah. In that specific part of it.
They thought we were crazy, honestly, and but they love it now,
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's a good story to end on. That's phenomenal. I am now, my goal in life is to my bar is not mobile, so but I will tell my son, well, he's an only child, so I guess he won't have to flip a coin, but we'll
just make him think there's some competition out there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I'll tell my wife that. Maybe it'll inspire us to have another child.
Oh, definitely.
She's not listening, I promise. All right, well, let's go through these questions, and Ashby, you're going to pick your favorite, and Timo, please pick your favorite. And I will be the bad person as always here, to choose who gets the 3 bottles signed by each of our lovely guests this evening, and who gets the still amazing prize of the swag bag. So we have, I'll just go through the questions here. We have the byproducts of your distillation process. What do you do with them? Do you use the same yeast for all distillates? What gin techniques have you learned along the way that you apply to whiskey distillation? What is the story behind the name Spirit Works?
That's a good one.
Did you have an idea of the expressions that you wanted to produce when you started, or did the climate dictate that after? Can you speak to what it's like to be different in Sonoma County from the wine industry? What constitute wheat whiskey versus a wheated bourbon? And then what did your family and friends say when you wanted to open a distillery? Let me just make sure I didn't forget any. Don't believe so. I think that is all of them. So,
are we picking?
What is your favorite question?
I like the question, what is wheat whiskey versus a wheated bourbon versus things like that. I can imagine it oddly confusing out there. And so I'm happy to always, get deep into that and start explaining what the TTP requires us to do and how we make excellent spirits in the same time.
That is Rob over at Bourbon Collect. So he is in contention.
I mean, the story that I got into most is what did your family think?
I think
when we built this distillery, and I think it's really important for us, the community side and the support that we've had to get into this business in the first place actually involves both our families in many ways, and so it's really, we wouldn't be here without them, that's for sure. And it's a testament to the people involved in this particular company to where we're at today. I mean, we get to drive the bus, but I mean, someone had to put all this together with us as well, and so we're grateful for that family side of things. So I'm probably going to go with what did your family and friends think? as well.
All right. Well, anybody that knows me knows that I'm a big softie and that I love stories. So Ashby, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to pick Timo's question.
Nailed it.
So Danielle Williams, congratulations. We'll have some amazing bottles sent to you from Spiritworks, signed by both Ashby and Timo. And then Rob will have a great swag bag sent to you in the coming weeks. And we're just a little bit over an hour here, and I can't thank you enough, Ashby and Timo. If anybody, I know a lot of our members are in California. We have a lot of restaurants in Northern California. Please go. I have not had the pleasure to go to Spiritworks, but I hope to one day soon. And I urge all our members to make the trip, and just genuinely thank you for making amazing whiskey made in California. It's just super cool. I'm very proudful of being a California native and seeing artisans and producers like yourself producing great stuff. So thank you very much. Hope you have a great evening. And if you have any last words, please speak now or forever hold your,
Come visit us.
Yeah, come visit us. Track us down online. You can find our other products online as well. Track us down. Just go to our website. And but it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Trevor.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone. Cheers.
Good night.